I am Claudia, 35 years old, and I still remember the sting of my father's words, calling me worthless as a little girl. Growing up as the only daughter with two brothers who received nothing but love and praise was like living in different worlds under the same roof. Years of emotional abuse drove me to the edge until the night I decided I couldn't take it anymore. But something changed when my father found my note. If you have ever felt invisible to the people who should love you most, let me know where you are watching from and subscribe to join others who understand this pain. I grew up in a seemingly perfect middle-class suburban neighborhood in Canton, Michigan. Our house was the one with the perfectly manicured lawn that my father William insisted on maintaining himself every Saturday morning. From the outside, we appeared to be the ideal American family. My mother Jessica worked long hours as a nurse at the local hospital, often picking up night shifts, which meant she was sleeping when we were awake and working when we were home. This left my father in charge of raising us most of the time. My brothers James and Thomas were my father's pride and joy. James was 3 years older than me, athletic and outgoing, just like my dad had been in his youth. Thomas was 2 years younger, quieter, but incredibly smart with numbers, which my father said would make him a great businessman someday. And then there was me sandwiched between them, never quite fitting into what my father wanted. William Stevens built his construction company from scratch after dropping out of college. He was a tall, imposing man with calloused hands and traditional values that seemed set in concrete, just like the foundations his company poured. He believed men should be strong providers and women should be supportive homemakers. These outdated views shaped our household dynamics in ways that would leave lasting scars. The difference in how my father treated us was obvious from my earliest memories. When James brought home a B on his report card, Dad would ruffle his hair and say, "That is my boy. Next time, we will get that A." When I brought home straight A's, he would barely glance at it and say, "That is what girls are supposed to do in school." During Christmas, my brothers would receive expensive sports equipment, gaming consoles, and later car parts for the vehicles they would rebuild together. I would receive practical items like clothes or books. When I received a chemistry set one year, because I had been begging for it, my father said, "Your grandmother picked that out. Seems like a waste since you will be taking care of children someday, but maybe it will keep you quiet for a while." Family gatherings were particularly painful. My father would parade my brothers around to his friends and colleagues, bragging about James scoring the winning touchdown or Thomas winning the math competition. When someone would ask about me, he would shrug and say, "She does fine in school," before quickly changing the subject. I tried everything to earn his approval. I maintained perfect grades, joined every academic club, and still helped with dishes and laundry, while my brothers were exempt from household chores. I would wake up early on Sundays to make him breakfast before anyone else was awake. His response was usually, "The eggs are overcooked," or "The toast is too dark." I would apologize and try harder next time. My mother saw what was happening but seemed powerless to change it. Occasionally she would say things like, "William Claudia worked really hard on that science project. Maybe you could go see it at the fair." He would dismiss her with, "I have to help James with practice," or "Thomas needs help with his Pinewood Derby car." Eventually she stopped trying, retreating into longer hospital shifts and occasional glasses of wine that over the years would become bottles. The only person who truly saw me was my grandmother, my father's mother, ironically. Grandma Ruth was a soft-spoken woman who had worked as a librarian before retiring. During my weekly visits to her house, she would listen to my stories, praise my accomplishments, and teach me about strong women throughout history. "Your father comes from a different time," she would explain, though we both knew that was no excuse. "But you, my sweet girl, are made for this new world where women can be anything." I remember one particular evening when I was 9 years old. We were having a backyard barbecue to celebrate James making the junior football team. Dad was grilling burgers, telling everyone how his son was following in his footsteps. I had just won the school spelling bee that same day, beating kids 2 grades above me. When I tried to tell him, he cut me off with, "Not now, Claudia. We are celebrating something important." Grandma Ruth, who was sitting nearby, stood up and announced to everyone, "My granddaughter won the district spelling bee today. Beat children much older than her." There was a moment of awkward silence before guests offered congratulations. My father flipped a burger with more force than necessary and said nothing. Later that night, I heard my parents arguing my mother's voice, insisting, "She just wants you to be proud of her," and my father's dismissive, "Girls do not need the same kind of confidence boys do. She will be fine." But I was not fine. Each dismissal, each comparison to my brothers, each missed opportunity for affection chipped away at my sense of self-worth. I began to believe there was something fundamentally wrong with me, something that made me unlovable to my own father. I just did not understand why being born a girl made me so disappointing in his eyes. By the time I entered middle school, my father's criticism had evolved from passive dismissal to active belittlement. My body was changing, and with that came a whole new category of comments from him. "Do not eat that second helping, Claudia. No one wants a fat wife someday," he would say at dinner while encouraging my athletic brothers to bulk up with extra servings. When I was 13, I joined the science club and stayed after school for meetings twice a week. Rather than appreciating my academic interests, my father viewed this as an inconvenience. "Why cannot you do normal girl things? Your mother never had time for all these clubs, and she turned out just fine." The fact that my mother often seemed exhausted and unhappy apparently escaped his notice. The contrast in how he treated my academic achievements versus those of Thomas became increasingly painful. When Thomas won the 8th grade science fair with a project on structural engineering that my father had helped him build, there were celebrations and a special dinner out. 3 months later, when I placed second in the state for my project on environmental impact studies, my father did not even attend the ceremony. When I showed him the certificate later, he glanced at it and said, "Second place is just the first loser." School events became a source of anxiety rather than pride. At band concerts, he would beam during Thomas's trumpet solo, but look bored or check his phone during my flute performance. At parent-teacher conferences, he would ask my brother's teachers detailed questions about their progress and opportunities for advancement, while barely engaging with mine beyond asking if I was behaving properly. There was a particularly humiliating incident during my freshman year talent show. I had worked up the courage to sing a solo something that terrified me, but that my music teacher had encouraged. My mother and grandmother sat in the front row, while my father and brothers sat several rows back. After my performance, which received warm applause, I saw my father leaning over to James, whispering something that made them both laugh. Later, I overheard James telling a friend that my father had said, "I screeched like a cat caught in a lawnmower." I stopped singing after that. In fact, I began to make myself smaller in every way possible, trying to avoid becoming a target. But the less space I took up, the more my father seemed to find fault with what remained. My 14th birthday was when the first symptoms of anxiety became too severe to ignore. I began having panic attacks before family dinners, knowing they would inevitably include some form of comparison or criticism. I developed insomnia, lying awake replaying his cutting remarks and imagining what I could have said or done differently. Grandma Ruth noticed the changes in me. During one of our weekly visits, she found me crying in her bathroom. "This cannot continue," she said firmly. The following week, she took me to see a therapist under the guise of a girl's day out. Dr. Marshall was a kind woman with gray-streaked hair who helped me understand that what I was experiencing was emotional abuse. "Your father's behavior says everything about him and nothing about your worth," she told me. Those sessions, paid for secretly by my grandmother, became my lifeline. My 16th birthday crystallized exactly where I stood in the family hierarchy. For months, my father had been planning an elaborate party for Thomas's upcoming 14th birthday, renting out a local sports facility, and inviting dozens of his friends. 2 weeks before that, my own birthday passed without so much as a cake. When I came downstairs that morning, there was no acknowledgement from my father. My mother had left a card with $20 before leaving for her shift. At dinner, when I finally worked up the courage to mention it was my birthday, my father looked genuinely surprised. Is that today? I thought it was next week, he said, not bothering to check the calendar where all family birthdays were clearly marked. He pulled out his wallet and handed me a $50 bill. Get yourself something nice, he said before immediately turning to discuss Thomas's party plans. That night I heard my mother confronting him about forgetting. His response haunts me still. It is not like it is a milestone birthday or anything important. She does not even have friends to celebrate with. The truth was, I had stopped bringing friends home years ago, too embarrassed by how my father made me feel invisible in my own house. The relationship with my brothers deteriorated as we got older. James fully embraced my father's attitude, often joining in with dismissive comments or jokes at my expense. Thomas, younger and more sensitive, sometimes showed moments of empathy, but never enough to stand up for me. The path of least resistance was to side with my father, and both boys learned early that this was how to receive love in our household. Meanwhile, my mother's occasional glass of wine with dinner had evolved into a bottle most nights. She would grow tearful and apologetic about her inability to change my father or protect me, but those words became emptier as the years went on. She was fighting her own battles with a husband who viewed her career as secondary to his, despite her nursing job providing the family's health insurance and a significant portion of our income. By 16, I had learned to stop sharing my thoughts, interests, or dreams with my father. I abandoned my passion for environmental science because it led to mocking comments about tree huggers and hippie nonsense. I quit the debate team after he refused to attend a regional competition where I was representing our school. I began crafting a false self that I thought might finally please him, quiet and unassuming and unambitious. The only place I felt safe expressing my true feelings was in my journal, hidden inside a hollowed-out copy of Jane Eyre that my grandmother had given me. Those pages contained the rage, confusion, and deep sadness that I could not show anywhere else. Why does he hate me? I wrote again and again, never finding an answer that made the pain any less. Despite the emotional turmoil at homeschool became my sanctuary. By my junior year, I had established myself as one of the top students at Canton High School. My AP classes provided the intellectual challenge I craved, and several teachers had taken notice of my abilities, especially in the sciences. Mrs. Rodriguez. My chemistry teacher became a particular ally. She noticed how I would light up during lab experiments and how quickly I grasped complex concepts. You have a natural aptitude for scientific thinking, she told me after class one day. Have you thought about pursuing this in college? The truth was, I had been thinking about it constantly. In my hidden journal, I had allowed myself to dream about studying environmental engineering, developing sustainable solutions for communities affected by pollution and climate change. But voicing those ambitions felt dangerous, like stepping onto thin ice. With Mrs. Rodriguez's encouragement, I joined the school's competitive science team and discovered I had a talent for environmental science and engineering challenges. For the first time, I found myself surrounded by peers who valued the very qualities my father dismissed. Within that team, I was not just a girl, but a valued contributor with ideas worth hearing. Mr. Peterson, the physics teacher who coached our team, pulled me aside after we placed first in a regional competition my junior year. You should be thinking about top-tier schools, he said. MIT, Stanford, Caltech. With your grades and these competition results, you could have a real shot. The idea seemed so impossible that it made my stomach hurt. Even if I could get accepted, my father would never support such an ambition. Yet a tiny spark of hope refused to be extinguished. I began researching colleges in secret using school computers and my grandmother's laptop during visits. I learned about scholarships and financial aid packages that might make attendance possible without parental support. Mrs. Rodriguez helped me prepare for the SATs, giving up her lunch breaks to review practice tests with me. When senior year began, I had a plan. I would apply to top engineering programs, as well as safer options closer to home. If accepted with enough financial aid, I would figure out the logistics later. The application process itself became a secret project with teachers writing recommendations and my grandmother helping with application fees. On a crisp December morning, I checked my email in the school library and had to clamp my hand over my mouth to stifle a scream. There it was, my early acceptance to Massachusetts Institute of Technology with a full academic scholarship. My hand trembled as I forwarded the email to Mrs. Rodriguez with just 3 words: "It actually happened." She found me between classes and pulled me into an empty classroom for a proper celebration complete with tears and a heartfelt hug. "I always knew you could do it," she said. "This is just the beginning." For weeks I carried the acceptance letter printed out and folded in my pocket like a talisman. I showed my grandmother, who cried happy tears, and promised to help however she could. I even cautiously shared the news with my mother one morning before school, when my father and brothers were not around. She looked simultaneously proud and terrified. "Your father has always assumed you would go to community college if you went at all," she warned. "He is not going to like this." "But it is MIT," I argued, "with a full scholarship. He does not even have to pay for it." She squeezed my hand. "I will try to help him see reason, but prepare yourself." I spent weeks rehearsing how to tell my father, creating and discarding dozens of approaches. Should I emphasize the prestige, the scholarship, the fact that it would cost him nothing? Should I wait until he was in a good mood, or perhaps do it in public to minimize his reaction? In the end, I chose a Sunday evening when everyone was home for dinner. My mother knew my plan and had made my father's favorite pot roast as a buffer. My brothers were present, which I hoped might temper his response. "I have some news," I said during a lull in conversation, my voice steadier than I felt. "I applied to some colleges this fall, and I just heard back from MIT. I got in with a full scholarship to study environmental engineering." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. My mother smiled encouragingly. Thomas looked surprised but impressed. James looked up from his phone with mild interest. My father set down his fork very precisely. "Massachusetts Institute of Technology," he said slowly, as though tasting something bitter. "And when exactly were you planning to discuss this with us?" "I am discussing it now," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I just received the acceptance." "So you went behind our backs, applied to a school across the country without any consideration for this family?" "I did not think you would support me applying," I admitted. "But it is a full scholarship, one of the best engineering programs in the world." He laughed, a sharp sound devoid of humor. "Engineering, you? And what makes you think you could handle something like that? You can barely change a light bulb without calling for help." "That is not true," I said, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. "I have the highest GPA in my class. My teachers think I can do this." "Your teachers?" he scoffed. "What do they know about the real world, about what it takes to succeed?" My mother attempted to intervene. "William, this is a prestigious opportunity. We should be proud." He turned his glare to her. "Stay out of this. This is what happens when you fill her head with nonsense about careers and independence. She thinks she is too good for a normal life." Turning back to me, his voice hardened. "You are not going to MIT or any school like that. It would be a waste of their scholarship and your time. You will go to community college here, where we can keep an eye on you, and you will work part-time at my office handling the filing like we always discussed." We had never discussed any such plan, but that detail seemed unimportant in the face of his categorical refusal. "But the scholarship," I tried again, "it covers everything." "Not everything," he countered. "Who is going to pay for flights home, book spending money? And the parent section of your financial aid requires our tax information, which I have no intention of providing." The reality hit me like a physical blow. Without his cooperation on the financial aid forms, the scholarship could not be processed. Without his permission, as I was still 17, I could not even accept the offer. He held all the power, and he knew it. "This discussion is over," he said, returning to his dinner. "MIT," he muttered, with a shake of his head. "Completely ridiculous." I looked to my mother, who stared at her plate with tears in her eyes. To my brothers, who averted their gazes. The walls of the dining room seemed to close in as the full weight of my father's control over my future became undeniably clear. All my hard work, all my planning and dreaming rendered meaningless by his arbitrary decision. In that moment, something inside me that had been bending for years finally broke. The weeks following my father's rejection of MIT became the darkest period of my life. January in Michigan brought short gray days and long, isolating nights that mirrored my internal landscape. While my classmates excitedly compared college acceptances and planned dorm room decor, I withdrew further into myself. Mrs. Rodriguez and Mr. Peterson were devastated when I told them I would not be accepting the MIT offer. They offered alternatives, suggesting I wait until turning 18 in April to accept without parental consent or apply for legal emancipation. But the process seemed overwhelming, and the thought of openly defying my father filled me with a paralyzing fear I could not overcome. My father, seemingly satisfied with crushing my ambitions, became almost pleasant, talking about arranging a filing position for me at his construction company office starting in the summer. "You will learn practical skills there," he would say, as though offering a generous opportunity rather than a life sentence. "College is overrated anyway. Look at me, a college dropout running my own successful business." He conveniently ignored that his dropout status came after 2 full years at Michigan State, with financial support from his parents, or that times had changed dramatically since he entered the workforce. Home became increasingly unbearable. My mother had retreated even further into her night shifts and wine bottles. My brothers were wrapped up in their own lives. James was finishing his business degree at the University of Michigan, where my father had proudly paid his full tuition. Thomas was applying to Ivy League schools with my father's enthusiastic support. The isolation grew more profound as I watched my few close friends make plans for futures that were quickly diverging from mine. They meant well, but their excitement about dorm assignments and freshman orientation stood in stark contrast to my confined reality. I began researching alternatives, looking into community colleges that might allow me to transfer to 4-year institutions later. I even secretly contacted the MIT admissions office to ask if I could defer my acceptance until I turned 18 and could make my own decisions. They were sympathetic, but explained that without the financial aid forms completed, they could not hold my scholarship. My grandmother, now in her 70s and increasingly frail, suggested I move in with her after graduation, but we both knew her small fixed income could not support my education. Still, the offer meant everything to me. My journal entries from this period show a rapidly deteriorating mental state. January 12th. Dad brought home brochures for the county community college today. Threw them on my bed and said, "This is more your speed anyway." James laughed. No one said anything. January 20th. Saw the MIT welcome package in the mail. Dad threw it in the trash before I could open it. When I tried to retrieve it, he said, "Know your place, Claudia. You're reaching above yourself and it's embarrassing to watch." I waited until everyone was asleep and dug it out of the garbage. Hid it under my mattress. February 3rd. Mom found me crying in the bathroom. Said she was sorry things weren't different. Asked what she could do to help. When I said, "Stand up to him just once," she just left. Heard the wine bottle opening downstairs. The cutting began on a Tuesday night in February. I had been researching self-harm for weeks, drawn to forums where others described the temporary relief it provided from emotional pain. My first attempt was hesitant, shallow scratches with a razor blade that barely broke the skin of my upper thigh, easily hidden under clothing. The sharp sting and sight of blood brought an unexpected clarity, a physical pain that temporarily overshadowed the emotional one. I was careful, clinical almost. I read about infection prevention and scar minimization. I kept my razor blades clean and hidden in a small tin inside my hollowed-out book. The cuts were always in places no one would see a private rebellion inscribed on my own body. As winter turned to spring, the cutting became more frequent, deeper. Each new rejection from my father, each celebration of my brother's achievements that highlighted what I was denied each day closer to a future I had not chosen, resulted in new marks on my skin. The physical pain continued to provide temporary escape from the suffocating reality of my life. In March, my father learned that Thomas had been accepted to Cornell with a partial scholarship. He announced a special dinner out to celebrate renting a private room at an expensive restaurant downtown. I was expected to attend and smile appropriately, which I did while wearing long sleeves to cover the fresh cuts on my arms from the night before. During the dinner, my father gave a toast to Thomas, proving that hard work and intelligence can take you anywhere. The sky's the limit for you, son. Your mother and I could not be prouder of what you have achieved and what you will become. The words were like acid burning through my carefully constructed facade. The contrast between his boundless pride in Thomas and his complete dismissal of my identical accomplishments was so stark, so unjust, that I nearly screamed across the table. Instead, I excused myself to the bathroom, locked the stall door, and bit down on my hand until I tasted blood rocking back and forth, until I could compose myself enough to return. The breaking point came in early April, a week after my 18th birthday, which had passed with minimal acknowledgement. I overheard my father on the phone with a business associate laughing about kids these days and their entitlement. My own daughter, he said, actually thought she was MIT material. Had to set her straight before she embarrassed herself. Some girls just do not know their limitations. That night I wrote the note. It was not an impulsive act, but a carefully considered one, written and rewritten until every word expressed exactly what I needed to say. To my family. By the time you read this, I will have removed myself from a situation that has become unbearable. I want you to understand why. Dad. For as long as I can remember, you have made me feel worthless, simply for being born female. You celebrated James and Thomas while treating me as an inconvenience. You destroyed my chance at MIT, not because you were concerned about my welfare, but because you never believed I deserved opportunities equal to my brothers. The cuts on my body mirror the wounds you have inflicted on my soul year after year. Each one represents a time you chose to tear me down instead of build me up to dismiss my achievements, instead of celebrate them to make me feel small instead of help me grow. Mom, your silence and inaction made you complicit. You saw what was happening and chose the path of least resistance. The wine did not help you escape responsibility. James and Thomas, you accepted your privilege without question, content to benefit from the unearned advantages Dad gave you at my expense. I am not doing this for attention or sympathy. I am doing this because I cannot see any other escape from a future where I am forever diminished, forever less than forever, unworthy of the same respect and opportunities freely given to my brothers. I do not expect you to understand, or even to care very much. But I needed to speak this truth before I go. Claudia. I took a bottle of my mother's sleeping pills from her bathroom cabinet, stored them in my desk drawer, and planned to take them the following night when everyone would be attending one of Thomas's school events. But fate, or perhaps Providence, intervened in an unexpected way. The evening of my planned attempt, my father came home from work early with a migraine. I did not answer immediately the reality of being discovered before completing my plan, leaving me strangely calm. You know what it is? These cuts you mention, he continued, his voice unsteady. Show me. It was not a demand but a plea. Something in his tone so unlike his usual authoritarian manner made me comply. I set down the water glass, rolled up my sleeves, and then lifted the hem of my jeans to reveal the latticework of scars and fresh cuts that covered my arms and thighs. A sound escaped him, then something between a gasp and a sob. You did this to yourself because of me. I nodded, unable to find words beyond those I had already written in the note. He stood, abruptly walked to me, and for one terrifying moment I thought he might strike me. Instead, he wrapped his arms around me in what might have been our first real embrace since I was a very small child. His body shook with sobs. We are going to the hospital, he said when he finally pulled away. Right now. I have not taken anything, I clarified, suspecting he thought I had already attempted suicide. For those, he said, pointing to my exposed cuts. "And for this," he added, tapping his temple, "for whatever drove you to write this note." The emergency room experience passed in a blur. My father, usually so composed and commanding in public, sat hunched in a plastic chair, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. He answered the intake questions, mechanically flinching visibly when the nurse gently unwrapped my arms to examine the extent of my self-harm. When the psychiatric liaison asked to speak with me alone, my father started to object out of habit, then stopped himself. "Whatever she needs," he said quietly before stepping out. The evaluation was thorough and painful. I described the years of emotional abuse, the constant comparisons to my brothers, the destruction of my college dreams, and the gradual erosion of my sense of self-worth. The psychiatrist, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner, took detailed notes and asked pointed questions about my home environment. "Do you still intend to harm yourself?" she asked directly. I considered the question honestly. "I do not know," I admitted. "Nothing has changed except now they know." When my father was brought back and the psychiatrist did not mince words, "Your daughter has experienced what appears to be long-term emotional abuse and gender-based discrimination in your home," she told him. "She has been engaging in self-harm as a coping mechanism for depression and suicidal ideation directly related to this environment. She requires immediate therapeutic intervention and likely a change in her living situation." I expected defensiveness, denial, perhaps even anger. Instead, my father seemed to collapse further into himself. "What do we need to do?" he asked simply. The hospital recommended an intensive outpatient program and arranged for a social worker to follow up regarding my home situation. My father agreed to everything without hesitation. He called my mother, who arrived at the hospital with my brothers in tow, all of them shocked and confused by the sudden emergency. When my mother saw my bandaged arms and the suicide note, which my father had brought to show the doctors, she became hysterical. Between sobs, she kept repeating, "I knew something was wrong, but I did not know it was this bad. I should have done something." My brothers stood awkwardly in the corner of the room. James looked anywhere but at me while Thomas kept wiping tears from his eyes, murmuring, "I am sorry, Claudia. I am so sorry." The first attempt at a family conversation happened there in the hospital room, halting and painful. My father struggled to form complete sentences through his tears. "I never thought," he began, then stopped. "I did not realize how much I was hurting you. The way my father treated me, I just thought it was normal, but not this. Never this." It was the first mention I had ever heard of my grandfather's treatment of my father. Grandma Ruth had alluded to it over the years, but the specifics had remained a mystery. The hospital discharged me on the condition that I begin the outpatient program immediately and continue regular therapy. The ride home was silent except for my mother's occasional sniffling. Everyone seemed afraid to speak, as though the wrong word might push me over an edge I was already teetering on. That first night back home, no one knew quite how to act. My father insisted on checking on me every hour, which was both touching and suffocating. My mother kept bringing me tea and snacks I did not ask for. My brothers hovered nearby, attempting small talk that fell painfully flat. I felt simultaneously vindicated that they finally saw my pain and terrified that nothing would actually change once the initial shock wore off. I slept with my bedroom door locked that night, the remaining sleeping pills flushed down the toilet, but the razor blades still hidden in their usual place. I was not ready to relinquish that control just yet. The following days brought the beginnings of what would be a long, complicated healing process for our entire family. My father scheduled an emergency family therapy session, something I never imagined he would willingly attend. He sat stiffly in the therapist's office, clearly uncomfortable but determined. When the therapist asked him to reflect on the patterns that had led to this crisis, he struggled visibly with his composure. "My father had 3 sons. I was the middle one," he began haltingly. "My older and younger brothers could do no wrong in his eyes. But me, nothing I did was ever good enough. I was too sensitive, too bookish. Not man enough." He paused, the parallel suddenly dawning on him as he said it aloud. He praised them and tore me down every day, and I swore I would never be like him. The irony hung heavy in the air between us. So instead of making all your children feel worthless, the therapist said gently, you focus that treatment on your daughter while elevating your sons. My father's face crumpled. I did not see it. I truly did not see what I was doing. My mother found her voice during that session, 2 years of suppressed frustration finally surfacing. I threatened to leave you multiple times over how you treated Claudia, she said to my father. But I was too weak, too dependent. I drank to avoid facing my own cowardice. She turned to me, tears streaming down her face. I failed you as a mother. I saw what was happening and did not protect you. There is no excuse for that. My brothers, too, were forced to confront their complicity. James, always my father's favorite, seemed genuinely shocked when I detailed specific instances where he had joined in belittling me. Thomas admitted to recognizing the unfairness, but being too afraid of losing his own privileged position to speak up. It was easier to go along with it, he confessed, unable to meet my eyes. I told myself it was not that bad or that you were exaggerating. These revelations did not immediately heal the wounds of years of mistreatment. In fact, the first weeks were characterized by an uncomfortable walking on eggshells atmosphere, where everyone seemed afraid to interact normally with me. My father swung between smothering attention and guilty withdrawal. He would bring me small gifts, ask about my interests with forced enthusiasm, then retreat to his study when emotions became too intense. My mother abruptly stopped drinking and attended her first Al-Anon meeting, returning with red eyes and a tentative hope I had not seen in her for years. Most surprising was my father's appearance at my school one afternoon to meet with my guidance counselor. Without telling me, he had contacted MIT to explain the situation and ask if my scholarship offer could be reconsidered. When he told me about it that evening, I felt a complex mix of gratitude, anger that it had taken a suicide note to prompt this action, and a cautious, fragile hope. I do not know if they will still take you, he said, but I want you to know I am going to do everything in my power to fix what I broke, including signing whatever forms they need and paying whatever costs the scholarship does not cover. It was the first time I allowed myself to believe that perhaps my future was not irreparably damaged after all. The months following my suicide note and hospital visit marked the beginning of a painstaking reconstruction of both my sense of self and my family relationships. With 3 therapy sessions each week, including both individual and family counseling, we began the difficult work of acknowledging harmful patterns and establishing healthier ones. My father's transformation was neither immediate nor perfect, but it was sincere. He struggled with ingrained sexist attitudes that had been normalized throughout his own upbringing. In one memorable family session, he confessed that his own father had regularly told him, "Girls are for marrying, not for raising," implying that daughters were essentially temporary family members being prepared for someone else's household. I never questioned it, my father admitted. It was just how things were explained to me. Boys carried on the family name and business. Girls married and joined other families. Our therapist challenged him gently but firmly. And yet your own mother, Claudia's grandmother, worked as a professional and valued education highly. Did that not present a different model? My father's expression showed the cognitive dissonance he was experiencing. I suppose I compartmentalized that. Mom was different, special. The exception that proved the rule. Perhaps, the therapist suggested, your daughter is not so different from your mother. These insights did not undo years of damage overnight, but they created space for new understanding. My father began reading books about gender equality and the psychology of father-daughter relationships, awkwardly leaving them visible on the coffee table, as though hoping I would notice his efforts. Meanwhile, my mother made her own difficult journey. She entered an outpatient alcohol treatment program and began attending regular support group meetings. One evening, she came to my room and sat on the edge of my bed, hands twisting nervously in her lap. "I want you to know," she said, that I am getting help not just for the drinking, but for understanding why I allowed your father to treat you that way for so long. My own father was very similar, and I think I normalized behavior that should have been confronted. This glimpse into the generational patterns at work in our family helped me contextualize, though not excuse, the dysfunctional dynamics I had grown up with. As April turned to May, MIT responded to my father's appeal. While they could not offer the same full scholarship for the coming fall, they would hold a place for me if I wanted to defer for a year. This compromise presented an unexpected opportunity a year to heal before embarking on my academic journey. In the meantime, my father surprised me again by arranging a meeting with the Dean of Engineering at the University of Michigan. "It is not MIT," he acknowledged, "but it is an excellent program. You could start there and transfer later if you still want to." The fact that he was actively helping me pursue engineering, a field he had previously mocked as inappropriate for women, represented a significant shift in his thinking. When I was accepted to Michigan with a substantial scholarship, he arranged for us to tour the campus together, listening attentively during the engineering department presentation, rather than dismissing it as he once would have. My relationship with my brothers evolved during this period too. James, always the most aligned with my father's attitudes, initially struggled with the family's changing dynamic. His privileged position as the favored child was threatened by the new awareness of how harmful that favoritism had been. One afternoon, I found him in the backyard, aggressively chopping wood for the fireplace despite the warm spring weather. I watched from the deck for a while before approaching. "I am not trying to take anything away from you," I said quietly. He paused, axe held mid-swing. "I know that," he replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Dad loving me properly does not mean he loves you less." James set down the axe and wiped sweat from his forehead. "I know that too. Logically. It just feels like suddenly I am the bad guy for accepting what was freely given to me." "You are not the bad guy," I assured him. "You were a kid too. We were all just trying to survive in the family we had." It was not an instant reconciliation, but it opened a door to a more honest relationship. Over the coming weeks, James made efforts to ask about my college plans and even offered advice about campus life based on his own experiences. Thomas, who had always shown more sensitivity, made more rapid strides in rebuilding our relationship. He called me regularly from Cornell, where he had started summer courses, genuinely interested in my therapy progress and academic plans. "I think I always knew what was happening was wrong," he confessed during one late-night call. "But I was afraid to lose Dad's approval if I said anything." "I understand." I told him, surprised to find that I truly did. The power our father held over all our self-perceptions had been enormous. The most unexpected development came in June when my father suggested I apply for a summer internship at an environmental consulting firm where one of his construction clients worked. "They do sustainability assessments for building projects," he explained awkwardly. "I thought it might align with your interests in environmental engineering." The gesture meant more than he could know, a tangible acknowledgement of my career aspirations that he had previously dismissed. I applied and was accepted for the position, my first professional experience in my chosen field. On my first day of the internship, my father insisted on driving me, clearly nervous on my behalf. As I prepared to exit the car, he reached over and gently touched my arm, his eyes on the fading scars partially visible beneath my bracelet. "I am proud of you, Claudia," he said, the words still sounding unpracticed from his lips. "I should have said that years ago and every day since. I am sorry it took almost losing you to understand what I had." The summer internship proved transformative. Working alongside environmental scientists and engineers, I found confirmation of my aptitudes and passions. My supervisor, a woman with 20 years of experience in the field, became an important mentor, showing me what a career path in environmental engineering could look like. When fall arrived, I began classes at the University of Michigan's engineering program. My father helped move me into my dormitory, awkwardly carrying boxes and attempting small talk with my roommate's parents. Before leaving, he handed me an envelope. "Your grandmother wanted you to have this," he said. Inside was a check that would cover my books for the entire year, along with a note in my grandmother's shaky handwriting, "For the brilliant woman you are becoming. I always saw you clearly." My first year of college brought challenges and triumphs. The academic work was demanding but exhilarating. I made friends who knew nothing of my family history and saw me simply as Claudia, the dedicated environmental engineering student with innovative ideas about sustainable urban development. I continued weekly therapy sessions via video call, working through the lingering effects of years of emotional abuse. There were still difficult moments when my father would say something thoughtless during our Sunday phone calls, or when comparing my college experience to my brother's, would trigger old feelings of inadequacy. But there was also genuine progress. At Thanksgiving, my father asked thoughtful questions about my classes and appeared sincerely interested in my research project on water conservation systems. My mother, 6 months sober, prepared a meal where everyone's achievements were celebrated equally. The old dynamics had not disappeared entirely, but they had been named, challenged, and begun to shift. By the end of that first year of college, I had not cut myself in 10 months. The urge still surfaced during moments of stress or when old emotional triggers were activated, but I had developed healthier coping mechanisms through therapy. The scars remained physical reminders of how close I had come to giving up, but they no longer defined me. When I look back now at 35 on the journey that began that night, my father found my suicide note. "I see how far we have all come, though the path has never been straight or easy. My career as an environmental engineer has taken me around the world developing sustainable infrastructure solutions for communities facing climate change challenges. After Michigan, I did eventually attend MIT for my master's degree, with my father proudly attending my graduation. The education he once thought would be wasted on me has enabled me to help design water conservation systems now used in 3 countries. The relationship with my father evolved slowly over years, with both progress and setbacks. There were still arguments where old patterns would resurface, moments when his ingrained sexism would show itself in subtle comments or assumptions. But there was also his genuine effort to understand me and support my choices, even when they differed from his expectations. One breakthrough came when I was 27 and received a prestigious engineering award. My father attended the ceremony, and during the reception afterward, an older colleague asked him if he had always known his daughter would pursue engineering. "No," my father replied honestly. "I had very narrow ideas about what women should do. I nearly destroyed our relationship and almost lost her because of those beliefs." He looked at me across the room as he continued. "But Claudia knew herself better than I did. She fought for her path despite my resistance. I am incredibly fortunate that she gave me the chance to be part of her life after all I did to push her away." Hearing him acknowledge this truth publicly without defensiveness or qualification marked a significant healing moment for both of us. My mother's journey of recovery had its own challenges. After 5 years of sobriety, she experienced a relapse following my grandmother's death. The family rallied around her with a compassion that might not have been possible before our collective awakening. She returned to treatment and has maintained her sobriety since becoming an advocate for families affected by alcoholism and abuse. She and I developed a more honest relationship during my late 20s, one where we could acknowledge her failures as a protector without that defining our entire connection. "I was trying to survive too," she explained during one difficult conversation. "It does not excuse my inaction, but I hope it helps you understand." My brothers and I found our way to authentic relationships as adults. James, after initially struggling with the family's transformation, eventually did his own therapeutic work around the unhealthy masculine ideals our father had instilled. Now married with 2 daughters, he is consciously creating a different family culture where his girls are valued for their minds and spirits, rather than conformity to gender expectations. Thomas became a high school math teacher, rather than pursuing the corporate career our father had envisioned for him. "I want to be the adult who notices when kids are struggling," he told me when explaining his career choice. Who sees potential in those being overlooked? We have grown especially close as adults, the shared experience of our childhood creating a unique bond despite our different paths. In my personal life, healing from my upbringing meant learning to recognize healthy love and set appropriate boundaries. After several relationships where I accepted less than I deserved, therapy helped me understand how my family dynamics had shaped my expectations. When I met Michael at a climate conference 7 years ago, I was finally ready for a partnership based on mutual respect and equality. Our wedding 4 years ago represented another milestone in my family's healing journey. My father's toast acknowledged both our difficult past and hopeful present. To my daughter who taught me what real strength looks like, and to Michael who loves her as she has always deserved to be loved. I am a better man for having been humbled by Claudia's courage and forgiven despite my failures. The decision about whether to have children ourselves has been complex, laden with concerns about repeating generational patterns. Through therapy and honest conversations, Michael and I decided to become parents. Our daughter Elena is now 2, and I watch vigilantly for any signs that I am unconsciously recreating harmful dynamics. You are not your father, my therapist reminds me during moments of parenting anxiety. You have done the work to understand those patterns and break them. The physical scars on my body have faded over the years, but remain visible particularly on my upper thighs. For a long time, I hid them out of shame, wearing long shorts even at the beach. Now I view them differently, not as marks of weakness, but as evidence of survival during a time when suicide seemed like the only escape from unbearable pain. Occasionally, someone will notice them and ask. Depending on the context, I might share the simplified truth. I self-harmed as a teenager during a very difficult time. These scars remind me how far I have come. I have used my experience to help others facing similar struggles. For the past 8 years, I have volunteered with a mentoring program for young women pursuing STEM careers, particularly those from unsupportive family environments. I do not always share my full story, but when appropriate, letting these young women know that I understand their challenges from personal experience creates a powerful connection. The most unexpected aspect of healing has been learning to hold seemingly contradictory truths simultaneously, that my father caused profound harm and that he has worked genuinely to repair that harm. That my mother failed to protect me, and that she has her own wounds that contributed to that failure. That I can love my family deeply while acknowledging the damage our dynamics caused. I still attend therapy monthly, not because I am broken, but because I value the space to process ongoing family dynamics and ensure I am not unconsciously perpetuating harmful patterns. Healing is not a destination, but a continuing journey with unexpected challenges and rewards. What I have learned through this process is that true forgiveness does not mean forgetting or excusing harm. It means releasing the expectation that the past could have been different, while holding people accountable for their actions in the present. It means allowing people the space to change while protecting yourself from further harm. For those watching who might see themselves in my story, whether as the scapegoated child or the parent who recognizes harmful patterns in their own behavior, please know that transformation is possible. Patterns established over generations can be disrupted. New ways of loving and being loved can be learned at any age. The most powerful moment in my healing journey was not when my father found my suicide note or when he first apologized. It was years later when I realized I no longer needed his approval to feel worthy. My value was never actually determined by his assessment, though it took me decades to truly believe that. If you are in a family where you feel unseen, unvalued, or actively diminished, please reach out for help. The cycle can be broken. You deserve to be fully seen and celebrated for exactly who you are. What has been your experience with family healing? Has someone in your family made genuine amends for past harm? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more journeys of healing and transformation. Remember to like and share this video with someone who might need to hear that change is possible, even in the most difficult family situations. Thank you for listening to my story with such compassion.